All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a project that is just wonderfully absurd. We're going to talk about taking ordinary, everyday children's glue and turning it into something you could, theoretically, drink. Let's get into how this is even possible. So let's just get right to it. The big question is a wild one. Can you really take a gallon of that white goo we all used in elementary school and transform it into drinkable ethanol? I mean, it sounds completely impossible. But the answer, as it turns out, is yes, thanks to some very fascinating and very, very messy chemistry. You see, the magic here is all in a plastic called polyvinyl acetate, or PVA for short. The key is how it's built. Think of PVA as these long chains, and hanging off those chains are things called acetate groups. The entire theory behind this crazy project is that if you can just chemically snap off those little groups, you're left with the raw material you need. In theory, it's pretty straightforward. In practice, oh boy, that's where the story gets really good. So, first things first, the physical challenge. Before any cool chemistry could happen, the creator had to figure out how to get a gallon of wet, sticky glue into a solid, usable form. And let me tell you, this turned out to be a massive hurdle all on its own. You'd think drying glue would be the easy part, right? Well, think again. Almost immediately, this thick skin formed right on top, trapping all the moisture underneath. So 2 weeks go by, and it's still wet inside. It took a full month, a food dehydrator, and even a vacuum oven just to suck all the water out. A whole month just for step one? Can you believe it? And what did he get for all that trouble? Not a nice, easy-to-use powder. Nope. He was left with these solid, rock-hard blocks of almost pure PVA plastic, which of course created the very next problem. How in the world do you break something this tough into pieces small enough to actually work with? His first few tries were, let's just say, a complete disaster. A food processor, the blades just got dull. A blender, it literally did nothing. So he resorted to a good old-fashioned hammer, and the only thing that broke was, yep, his table. This plastic was just unbelievably tough. So he had to get creative. And the solution was as brilliant as it was ridiculous. A cheap wood chipper he bought online. It was the only thing with enough brute force to shred those plastic blocks into chunks he could finally use. Okay, so the plastic is finally shredded. Now we can get to the real chemistry. The first major transformation was turning that shredded PVA into acetic acid, which is basically just super concentrated vinegar. So, the process, called pyrolysis, involves heating the plastic in a vacuum, and it worked. The acetate groups started breaking off and distilling over. The huge problem, though, was that a lot of other nasty stuff came along for the ride. The plastic itself started breaking down, creating this awful, toxic gunk that included acetone and cancer-causing benzene. And the smell, it was described as a mix of burnt plastic and gasoline. Just awful. Cleaning up that toxic mess was an epic saga in itself. First, he had to neutralize all that acid with almost 1 kilogram of baking soda. Then he had to boil off all the water and that dangerous gunk like the benzene. After that, he washed the solid stuff that was left over and over again with hot acetone. And only then could he finally use sulfuric acid to turn it back into pure acetic acid. What a process. And you'd think after all of that work, he'd be done, right? Not even close. It was still contaminated with water, so it needed one final, super complex distillation just to get the clean, dry acetic acid he needed for the next step. The level of persistence here is just incredible. All right, pure acetic acid is finally ready. It is time for the grand finale. The delicate, tricky, and, as it turns out, very temperamental reaction to turn that concentrated vinegar into actual ethanol. So the reaction kicks off, and almost immediately, things got weird. It started foaming up like crazy, bubbling and expanding inside the flask, and it looked like it was about to overflow at any second. But just when it looked like it was about to make a huge mess, the whole mixture just, poof, thinned out and became a normal liquid again. A moment of relief for sure, but the weirdness was just getting started. And then, completely out of nowhere, the entire thing seized up and froze into a solid, puffy white mass. I mean, a chemical reaction that just spontaneously freezes itself solid, that is not something you see every day. And just as bizarrely as it froze, it started to melt, and within just a few minutes, it was a complete liquid again. This constant back and forth between states just shows you how wild and unpredictable this whole process was. I think the creator's own words really sum it up perfectly. After watching it foam up, thin out, freeze solid, and then melt again, he just said, "I absolutely didn't trust it anymore." At that point, all bets were off.
But wait, there's more. The fight wasn't over yet. The reaction had created a nasty side product called dimethyl sulfide, and this stuff, it has this powerful, stomach-turning smell of rotten cabbage that had completely contaminated the alcohol. Getting rid of that awful stench was a total nightmare. It took more than 4 separate distillations, plus filtering it through charcoal each time just to get the smell out. And you gotta remember, with every single one of those steps, he was losing more and more of his precious final product. So, after all of that, the month of drying, the wood chipper, the 2 huge chemical transformations, and the endless purification steps, what was the result? Was it even worth it? Just to put this all into perspective, let's remember this whole insane journey started with a full US gallon of children's glue. That's almost 4 liters of the stuff.
And the final yield, after all that work, less than 90 milliliters. That's barely a triple shot of alcohol. Months of effort for just a tiny little vial. The efficiency was just shockingly bad. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for, what did it taste like? Well, the verdict was interesting. He described the flavor as distinctly chemical, like gasoline or something. Not exactly the smooth finish you're looking for, right? So in the end, what do we make of all this? Was it a brilliant demonstration of chemistry, proving that something impossible is actually possible? Or was it just an absurdly complicated, inefficient way to make a really bad-tasting drink? Well, I guess that's really up to you to decide.